Hi everyone, this is the next section for Integrated 2, KC2. So this is section 2.2 on rectangles and squares. So we're going to go over properties of rectangles and squares. Now we've already done properties of parallelograms and properties of a rhombus. Okay, so today we have rectangles and squares. So for the properties of rectangles, all of the properties of a parallelogram are included. Okay, and if you remember, there are 5 properties of parallelograms. Okay, aside from those 5 properties, you have 2 distinct properties for rectangles. The first one is that the diagonals are congruent to one another. And the second one is that you have 4 congruent right angles. Okay, so I have my picture below and I labeled it A, B, C, and D. Okay, so my diagonals, DB and AC are congruent. I'm actually going to write that on the side. So AC is congruent to DB. So in that way you see that the whole diagonal, not just, half of it or anything like that. It's the whole thing is congruent to the other diagonal. And then the next one is the right angles, and all of these angles, angle A, angle B, angle C, and angle D are right angles. And remember, right angles are 90-degree angles. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and apply these properties. So we're going to find the missing measurements of the following rectangles. Okay, so for number 1, I give you that part of the diagonal, or half diagonal, is 10, the other half is 10. I want to find, and I did this in the wrong place, I want to find this diagonal. Okay, that is my x. So, again, diagonals are congruent. So, x is equal to just 10 plus 10, which is 20. Okay. For number 2, you have to find w, x, y, and z. Okay, remember that these are also including the properties of a parallelogram, and we're given here that one of the sides is 5 inches and the other one is 3. But in a parallelogram, we know that opposite sides are congruent. So if this is 5, this has to be 5. So W is equal to 5 inches as well. Same thing with Z, right? If this is 3 inches, then Z has to be 3 inches as well. And then X, again, this is a rectangle, so all of these angles are right angles. So X is equal to 90 degrees, which is also equal to Y. For the following one, I have properties of a square. Okay, the properties of a square include all of the properties of a parallelogram and all of the properties of a rectangle, and then finally all of the properties of a rhombus. Okay, so basically a parallelogram could be, or a square could be a parallelogram, it could be a rhombus, and it can be a rectangle. Okay, so here is my picture. I'm going to give you guys a visual to this one. Okay, so again, I have a square labeled A, B, C, D. Okay, so my properties of a parallelogram, right, we know that diagonals bisect each other. We know that opposite sides are congruent. In a rhombus, all of the sides are congruent. So this is going to kind of be everything put together. Okay, so diagonals are congruent. We also know that these bisect each other, right? And it's a square, so they're all going to be equal. We also know that we have right angles at all of these angles, A, B, C, and D, and we have right angles in the middle because of a rhombus. We also know that opposite sides are congruent, or in a rhombus, all of the sides are congruent. So all of these sides are equal in a square. And then finally, we have the diagonals bisect that angle. So this is congruent to this angle, which is congruent to this one. These are congruent, and these are congruent. Okay. Again, we can also, draw in here that the opposite sides are parallel and things like that. I'm not going to draw it. It gets a little messy, but just make sure that you remember that it includes all of the properties of a parallelogram, all of the properties of a rectangle, and all of the properties of a rhombus. Okay? That's it.